Morning, Sam. How are you getting on today?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining me. So
No
listen,
problem.
guys, today's video, for anybody watching at home, is just a little chat with myself and Sam about the COVID-19 Assistance Fund and also any questions that you've got that might impact you as students due to the new lockdown that we're in at the minute. So we've got a lot of questions, as you can imagine. We've got well over 90 questions. So look, in the next half an hour, Sam, I'm just going to get through as many as I can with you. And then after that, the rest of your questions will all be answered on the Student Hub. So we just get into it?
Yep, great stuff. Let's go.
Perfect. So the first question then is in relation to eligibility. And this person says, will the agreed payments to campus living villages be credited to the accounts of all students living in the accommodation, regardless of if they are currently at university or at home, or is it just those that are currently not on the premises?
Okay, so the answer is yes. All students in campus living villages accommodation who had an active contract on January the 12th are eligible regardless of whether they're currently in accommodation, for example, if they have to come onto campus for an exempt course, or if they are staying at their non-term time address. So the answer is yes.
Okay, lovely stuff. Thank you, Sam. The
No
next
problem.
question then is in terms of the support. So this person has said, I do have a question about rent relief at Peel Park Quarter. Why is the COVID support fund a set amount for each student in Peel Park Quarter rather than a percentage of the overall contract? So they say that they're paying for a diamond room as it was the only room available when they were booking their accommodation, and £1,200 has a bigger impact for students with bronze rooms than those with larger contracts.
Yeah, it's a good question. And
Yeah.
I think the important thing is we've got to get impact hitting the ground as soon as possible to make a difference to students' lives. And we're trying to make a limited pot of money go as far as possible. And it's, as I said, it's really important to keep this simple and make sure that students get this rent contribution as soon as possible. So we've worked really hard with CLV on this, and they've paused the payment that was due on Tuesday, which was at the time of this recording was yesterday, so that students didn't have to pay first and then wait for a refund. So we're making a contribution to rent for all CLV students, but it's not tied to a specific room type or to a period of time. We also need to consider those not in CLV accommodation and ensure we can help them where possible too. So the main gist of the message is we need to make sure that we get it out as soon as possible. So that means keeping it as simple as possible.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Well, this question kind of along the same note as well. And this person has wrote in and they've said, hello, I'm a third year student who's meant to be living in private rented accommodation. Why is the rent relief fund for students in private rented accommodation a fixed amount rather than in amounts based on a percentage of your rent paid like it is for CLV tenants?
The answer is that the amount being paid to CLV students isn't a percentage of the rent paid. I've just mentioned that it's a contribution from the university which acknowledges the tough time that are being faced by all students at the moment. So, and again, to make the money go as far as possible, to be fair, we've had to make some difficult decisions. So CLV are our exclusive partner to provide accommodation in halls on campus, and we directly promote CLV to our students when they're joining the university and deciding where to live. Through the process of establishing the hardship fund, our approach has been to try and offer as much support as possible to as many students as we can. So the answer broadly is one of keep making sure the fund goes as far as possible for all students who need it, and so we can get as far as we can with all students.
Yeah, absolutely. Lovely. Thank you, Sam. Our next question then is another good question. And they wrote in and they've said, has Campus Living Villages contributed to the rent fund, or is that primarily from the university?
Okay, yeah, fair point. But the answer is that both the rent relief fund for students in private accommodation and the contribution to rent for those in CLV accommodation has been funded by the university. We've looked across our finances and found areas and places that we then need to deprioritise in order to prioritise this. So there is a contribution from government to the relief, but otherwise it's the university itself that's financing this scheme.
Okay, perfect. Good to know. Our next question then, Sam, says, will the university provide support for students trying to get an early release from privately rented contracts?
Sure, this is a difficult one. As the circumstances of individual students vary so much, and it really is a huge variance in circumstance, it wouldn't be appropriate for us as an institution to make an intervention with regards to rental contracts. So As some students may require accommodation close to the university in the longer term, it wouldn't be appropriate or indeed desirable in many cases for contracts to be cancelled when face-to-face teaching could resume shortly. Other circumstances dictate that continuing to live in rental accommodation would be the preferable option. After working with the Students' Union and taking the needs of all of our diverse student population into account, the payment contribution as announced this week has been arrived at, and we think that's the best way to support our community with the immediate difficult needs that have occurred as a result of the pandemic. So in short, we won't be intervening in the wide variety of rental contracts and circumstances, and we think the best way we can make a difference is through the payment and the contributions that I've mentioned previously.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. The next question then says, is there anything being done to lower people's tuition fees, or will there be any extra loan to support job losses?
Okay, so this is a massive issue, and it's a sector-wide concern. So the issue of university tuition fees and refunds, make it clear, is not an issue particular to Salford. It's a sector-wide concern. As was seen on the Prime Minister's press conference on Tuesday, 5th of January, it's one that needs to be urgently reviewed by government. So we're putting pressure on both Universities UK, which is our industry body, and the Department for Education to work towards a sector-wide solution. And the Vice-Chancellor, our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Helen Marshall, has also written this week to the Secretary of State, Gavin Williamson, on this matter. We're committed to delivering the learning outcomes. This is the important bit in terms of what students get. We're committed to delivering the learning outcomes that the students would expect, and we've invested significantly to enhance our online provision and provide additional support in providing access to technology for our students. In terms of loans to support student job losses, we don't offer loans, but those who are struggling financially should look at the COVID-19 Assistance Fund via the links that are going to be somewhere in this message, so that they can access the financial support that we have put in place.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Sam. The next question then comes in from a parent. So they said they're a parent of a Salford student. Can you let me know what we can expect in terms of numbers of hours of online learning? And to add to that, then they've also asked, is there anything that they can access as a parent?
Okay, yep. So I'm afraid there isn't a standard answer to that, because the balance of teaching and the balance of project work and independent learning and group work and self-directed study, etc., varies significantly between courses because of the nature of the courses. One would reasonably expect the demands of a dance course, for instance, to be quite different from the demands and the patterns of working on a nursing programme. So students accessing learning through both lectures on Teams and through Blackboard, which is our virtual learning environment, that's the way they are predominantly engaging with their learning. And our VLE, our virtual learning environment, requires everyone to be a registered student to access it. So I'm afraid it's not possible for parents to access it independently unless their son or daughter shows you the virtual learning environment. So in short, there isn't a standard answer to the general expectation, because it's all tailored to making sure that the students are able to meet the learning outcomes, and those are obviously going to vary significantly by course. And the VLE is accessible only by the secure login of the student.
Okay. Perfect, thank you. So Sam, the next question then comes in from somebody else, and they've asked what support is available for international students.
Sure, okay. So international students in CRV will get the rent relief that we've already talked about, and those in private rented accommodation can apply to the rent relief fund as well. There's also the International Support Fund where they can apply for assistance, and I know that the team will put a link in this video or related to that below.
Perfect, lovely, thanks a million. The next question then, is there a reason for not extending the PMC deadline like you did in the first lockdown?
Yeah, okay, this is a very technical answer, because it relates to our academic regulations and our academic practice. So forgive me if I go into a bit of detail here, but gives you a bit of background, and also tells you how we have arrived at this current position. So if we go back a bit, when the national lockdown, first one, began in March, we were faced with the need to review the accessibility of all outstanding assessments at very short notice. And it was important under those circumstances that we took steps to ensure our students had the best possible chance to submit and succeed in their assessments, recognising that in many cases, both the nature of assessment had changed, but also that students found themselves in very different and often difficult study situations. So to that end, we introduced at that point back then an extended period for late submission. I think it was extended to 21 days, as well as introducing a marked safety net to reflect that even when students were able to submit work, maybe the standard of their submissions may have been impacted. So we wanted that safety net policy was there.
Yeah.
And however, when we did that, introducing that 21-day submission window wasn't without consequence. For instance, we weren't able to permit additional time beyond that 21 days for students with reasonable adjustment plans, or RAPs. We're also aware that for some students, the allocation of 1 or 2 weeks of additional time, it didn't really resolve what we were hearing. It didn't really resolve the challenge of their circumstances. And so a deferred submission to a later date would have been more appropriate. So with all that learning in hand, when we began planning for the current academic year, we did so with a better understanding then of the types of disruption that COVID restrictions can cause, and that was taken into account as much as possible as we designed the teaching and learning and assessment. So we felt the return to our standard periods for late submission and the reintroduction of the additional RAP extension period now was the right thing to do. What we have done is keep in place the flexibility of the self-certification of PMC applications, because we're aware that in many cases the type of disruption to study caused by, for example, caring responsibilities were quite impossible to predict or evidence. So taking all those factors into account, rather than adjusting the late submission window again mid-flow, which would cause its own problems again, we've introduced 2 other mitigations which we hope will support the success of students facing a wide range of challenging circumstances. So the first one is an alternative model which achieves the same ends as an extended late submission window, but with what we believe is a more useful amount of time and flexibility to accommodate program-specific study patterns. So this is to encourage students struggling to meet the submission deadline, even with the 7-day late window. It encourages them to use the PMC process to apply for a replacement submission opportunity. An accepted PMC allows this submission to have the same status as the first submission, i.e. it doesn't have a cap on the marks. And what we're doing is asking program teams to consider the diet of assessment and study patterns and to offer students an early replacement submission opportunity so the work can be submitted and marked within the normal flow of the academic year. The second point is the second mitigation is the introduction of a new no detriment policy for this academic session, and this was announced recently with details shared on the Student Hub. And the simplest explanation of the no detriment policy is that it allows marks achieved this year to be disregarded if they would lower the classification a student would have otherwise achieved. So we hope that this encourages and helps students to submit work in a year, even if that work is not of the standard to which they would normally aspire to, as the lower marks will not negatively impact the degree outcome. So we've got those 2 things in place, which hopefully get us to the same point and get students to the same point as well. Sorry for that lot. There's a fair amount of technical detail in that one.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
To unpack.
Lovely, thank you.
No
So our next question then, somebody has wrote in, they've asked what other changes are being made to assessments, especially for those who are now studying at home with children. It's really hard to concentrate and there's huge amounts of additional pressure.
Yeah, this is such a difficult question. And I think I'm going to speak very personally now. I've got a 3-year-old daughter who is rocking around in the background at the moment. I think she's dressed as a pirate at the moment.
It's horrible.
And it's really difficult. It's really difficult. My wife works as well, and so we juggle looking after our daughter and keeping her entertained with the necessary demands of work or study. So I suppose the first thing to say is, yes, it's really difficult. And we, at the same time as acknowledging that difficulty, we also have to make sure that all our courses can demonstrate that our students have met the learning outcomes, because we know that our courses are valued by employers and they're looking at those learning outcomes when they consider students for jobs and saying, can you do this? Have you got the evidence of doing this? So it's important that we maintain the standards of assessment and the rigor of assessment, even if the assessment nature has changed significantly. And at the same time, we're doing as much as we can to acknowledge the very difficult circumstances students are working in, which includes access to tech, which I'll maybe talk about in a little while, and also making the assessments as flexible as possible. Now, I'm going to be very frank. I don't think, whilst any restrictions are in place, I don't think this tension is going to go away. I think it's part of the operating environment, and I don't think any university in the land could make it go away. What we
Yeah.
can do is continue to look at our assessments, continue to listen to the student voice, continue to listen to questions like this, which is great, and continue through the assessment and progression work that I've mentioned previously with PMCs, continue to look at how we're doing to make sure that in the round, we're continuing to support students as best as possible and help them succeed. So it's a difficult answer. I wish I had a magic wand, but I don't know,
No.
and that's the way it is.
Yeah. Absolutely lovely. Thank you. Our next question then, what have they said? They've said, I've heard lots of other students talk about the safety net or a no detriment policy. Is that something Salford have got in place at the minute?
Yeah, so as I mentioned previously, yes, we do have the no detriment policy in place, and it's in place for the entirety of this year. So again, just to recap what I mentioned earlier, the simplest explanation is it allows marks that are achieved this year to be disregarded if they would lower the classification a student would have otherwise received. Because it might be that a student, as we've just said, is working under very difficult circumstances and manages to get something in, but it's not quite as good as they might have done. Now, if that submission has the potential to lower the classification that student would have otherwise achieved, that mark will be disregarded. And essentially, we hope that that will encourage and help all students to submit work in a year, even if it's not quite of the standard. The one thing I would say is, with the no detriment policy in place, and I'm speaking to all students here now, keep your eyes on the prize, because get your work in, even if it's not of the standard that you would expect. If it passes, and if it moves through, it then gives you the best possible opportunity to succeed, because you will have met the learning outcomes.
Completely.
And keep your eyes on the prize and focus on getting your degree. We're going to continue, as you can hear through this conversation, we're going to continue to focus on our fundamental purpose, which is to help you get your degree. And you need to keep continuing to focus on your fundamental goal in your time with us, which is to get your degree. So keep on picturing that certificate, and keep on picturing that graduation.
Absolutely lovely advice. Thank you, Sam. So our next question then, somebody says, is there a fund in place to support students in regards to equipment? So they say we currently can't get access to things like laptops or camera equipment or anything like that.
Yeah, we've got that in place. So, and it's called the Salford Technology Fund, and it's in place for helping students to purchase laptops, and the team will be dropping a link into the chat below, which will give full details. Unfortunately, at the moment, that fund doesn't support other equipment. So if there are issues with completing your work due to lack of kit, in the first instance, what we would ask is that students speak to their tutors about that kit, and then we can, because that begins to give us the intelligence around that fuller picture. So it's called Salford Technology Fund, and the links in the chat below.
Perfect, lovely. So the next person has wrote in and they have said, what does semester 2 look like? Are we going to be fully online for the whole term?
The guidance is continually updating and changing, and at the moment the government has advised that all but a very small number of exempt courses should be taught fully online until at least February the 22nd, and the first review date for that advice will be February the 15th. And right now it's really hard to know what things will look like then. The briefings coming from the government seem to kind of give an updated picture. The last one was from Priti Patel yesterday, which talked about the current restrictions continuing. But it's really hard to know what things will look like. So when the government makes these announcements, I suppose this is useful to say, we don't get any prior notice of what's going to be in them. And we watch the same press conferences as everyone else does, and then often have to wait a few days for more detailed guidance. And we do want to return to at least blended learning as soon as possible. So when the government clears us to do this, we'll be looking to do this as soon as we can. But at the moment, the government guidance is that everything should be online, apart from a very small number of exempt courses.
Yeah. Lovely. Well, fingers crossed for us all. The next question then, somebody has asked, can they return to their student accommodation because all of their stuff is there?
Okay, let's go back to the government guidance as it stands at the moment. The government guidance is that you should not travel from your current location unless it's absolutely essential. And so our advice is that you don't come to campus at this time unless you are on an exempt course, or if you have a wellbeing reason, for example, you don't have anywhere else to go. Please don't travel to student accommodation unless it's absolutely essential.
Okay, cool. The next question then, actually quite a sad question. I can imagine there's a lot of people feeling this way. after going through the last hard semester.
Yep.
So they said, I haven't met anybody on my course or made any friends. Most people have been breaking the rules by socialising and partying, but I was too scared because I was cautious about the virus. It's been a very lonely experience so far and I've struggled. Will September be any different?
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
That's it, to use the vernacular, that sucks.
Yeah. I imagine the
And
situation people have been in this year, though, which is awful.
yeah, it's really hard. None of us can see the future, and I would hope that come September things will look really very, very different.
Yeah.
As soon as we're able to return to campus, we will return to campus and bring back all the activities that would ordinarily be in place as part of a holistic, vibrant student experience. But we have to wait until it's safe to do so. And we may still need to have additional safety measures in place, but I don't know what that will look like. Again, if I had a crystal ball, I would I'd be a rich person looking at September. But certainly I can say that everyone here is as keen as you are to get back to normal as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Right now, it's really important that we stick to the rules that are in place, as difficult as that may be. The question raised a couple of other points. If you're concerned about the behaviour of others, you can report that to security or chat to Ask Us anonymously. I think I would say that, when you go to the supermarket or wherever and you wear a mask, the mask is there for other people's safety. And I think we need to make sure that everyone is in the frame that this question, the person asking this question clearly is, which is I'm abiding by the rules, not of course my own safety, but also for the safety of everyone else. And those who don't are putting other people at risk. And I think they need to come on to that. And we certainly will address behaviour where we see it stepping out of line. I'll make that very clear. If anyone does have need additional support with mental health or well-being or anything else, please use the Ask Us team or our 24-hour support line. And again, those links are going to be in the chat below. But I'm sorry that the experience has been as it is. It's for reasons of obviously that are beyond all of our control, and we want to get back to normal as soon as possible.
Yeah. Definitely. Lovely advice again. Thank you, Sam. Well, Sam, that's actually all the questions that I've got here for you today.
Okay.
Now, I know we definitely didn't get through all of them. There's loads more. So if anybody at home is watching this video and you're thinking you haven't answered my question, in the next couple of days, we will be updating the FAQ section of our student hub, and all of the answers to your questions are going to be there. So just, if you're watching this video, have a little check back there in a couple of days' time and the answer to your question should be there. So Sam, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today.
No, you're welcome. It's lovely to speak with you, and thank you for asking all the questions.
Listen, stay safe. Have a lovely day.
No worries. You go steady, and I'll speak soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.